You wake up to the alarm. You get up, brush your teeth, make coffee, answer messages, rush to work, face traffic, meetings, tasks, demands. You have lunch looking at your cell phone, go back to sitting for more hours, and at night, you watch something to try to forget the day. You go to sleep, and the next day, you do it all over again. It seems like freedom, but it smells like a manufactured routine. The life we call modern carries something strange, an invisible structure that defines your time, your value, and even what you should want. There are no bars, but you feel the weight. You feel like you're being pushed, turned in a gear that never stops. It's as if there's a script that everyone follows, without question. Did you choose this, or was it chosen for you? Max Weber was a German sociologist who saw this script before most people. He didn't use light metaphors. He said we were being locked inside an iron cage, not a prison made of bars, but of logic, of rules, of systems that transform everything, even the human spirit, into something measured, organized, and predictable. And the worst part, it's a prison that you learn to love because it offers you comfort, stability, and security. But it comes at a very high price, the loss of your essence, your spontaneity, your soul. Weber noticed that the more rational society became, the further it moved away from the sacred, the human, the mysterious. The world became a mechanism, and in this mechanism, you became a part that needs to function, produce, obey, perform. Have you ever felt like you were always running, but didn't know exactly where you were going? Have you ever noticed that, even though you have theoretical freedom, you are always tied to deadlines, bills, goals, and schedules? That's the cage. It doesn't need to physically lock you up. It just needs to occupy your mind. And the scariest thing is that it wasn't imposed by force. You were trained to want it. From school onwards, you learn to follow schedules, meet targets, ask permission, even to go to the bathroom. Then you learn to choose a safe career, be punctual, dress professionally, smile at your boss, even when you're tired. It's a subtle but effective training. The system no longer needs chains. It convinced you to put on the uniform on your own. Weber saw this at a time when machines were still mechanical. Today, the gears are digital, psychological, cultural. And the most tragic thing, almost no one notices it, because the cage is silent, and it was made to look like freedom. But whoever listens to the silence begins to see the bars. At the beginning of the last century, while the world marveled at machines, trains, and the progress of cities, Max Weber observed everything with suspicion. He was not against science or progress, but he saw something worrying behind so much efficiency: the disappearance of the soul. Weber did not write to comfort. His words were like sharp mirrors, and perhaps that is why few dare to look at them today. While many celebrated modernity as liberation, he warned, we were exchanging faith for formulas, vocation for function, meaning for system. His great diagnosis was the advance of rationalization, a process where everything, work, time, behavior, even moral values, begins to be controlled by rules, calculations, and predictions. It seems good at first glance. After all, who doesn't want to live in an organized society? The problem is the invisible cost. Life begins to lose its poetry. Everything becomes a means to an end, and the end is just to keep functioning. For Weber, the pinnacle of this rationalization would be the construction of systems so efficient that they would suffocate the human spirit itself. This would give rise to modern bureaucracy, a web of hierarchies, procedures, and regulations, where decisions are no longer made based on values or intuition, but on roles, positions, and statistics. It doesn't matter who you are, but whether you are within the protocol. And here comes the symbol that made Weber stand out through time: the iron cage. He used this image to say that rationality, which once freed us from superstition, now imprisons us in a prison without emotion, without improvisation, without transcendence. A prison where everything has to be useful, measurable, profitable, including you. The cruelest part? This cage was not built by tyrants, but by ordinary people who believed they were doing the right thing. They were the ones who wanted to improve, organize, make everything more efficient, and that's why it's so hard to see. It was built with good intentions, but Weber was not just a critic. He was a lucid prophet. He knew that the world would not return to the past. He only wanted us not to lose what is essential. That, even surrounded by machines and methods, we would not forget that we are flesh, blood, soul. That we feel, we make mistakes, we dream. That there is more in us than any system can calculate. And today, more than 100 years later, the question echoes. Did we listen to Weber? Or did we choose to ignore him? Because you might think you're living in the 21st century, but you're actually living in the framework he envisioned. Just quieter, more polished, more digitized. The cage has gotten more elegant, but it's still a cage. The deepest irony of Weber's thought is that the very faith that once gave rise to meaning has become the engine that powers the modern prison. To understand this, we need to look at the origins of what he called the spirit of capitalism. Weber did not see capitalism as just an economic system. For him, it was a cultural force, a new way of living, of thinking, of relating to the world. And surprisingly, he found its deepest roots within the Protestant ethic. At the heart of this ethic was the idea of vocation, a calling. For early Protestants, especially Calvinists, work was not just a means of survival, but a spiritual duty. It was a sign of divine grace. Being productive, disciplined, punctual, and thrifty was seen as proof of faith. Material success was not sought out of vanity, but interpreted as confirmation of salvation. The result, a methodical, austere, results-oriented lifestyle. And this shaped the spirit of the West. Religion provided the spark, but over time, the flame became the engine. And that engine kept churning, even after faith had cooled. Weber called this the disenchantment of the world, a process in which things cease to have a soul and become functional. The sacred becomes empty. Work, which was a vocation, becomes an obligation. Routine, which was devotion, becomes a vicious cycle. And man, who once lived to glorify God, now lives to keep the machine moving. Thus, spiritual logic gave way to instrumental logic. And capitalism, now without religious roots, continues to exist, but without conscience. It doesn't ask why, it just wants you to produce, grow, multiply, without stopping, without thinking, without questioning. The tragedy is that in this new world, the heirs of this ancient ethic continue to act as if they were being watched by God. But the only judge now is performance. The divine gaze has been replaced by the boss, by the system, by the algorithm. Have you ever noticed how many people treat work as a kind of religion? They wake up early, follow rituals, sacrifice time, health, relationships, all for a future reward, which often never comes. And when it does, it's already too late to enjoy it. Faith became a spreadsheet, the altar became an office desk. The silence of prayer gave way to the noise of notifications. Weber never said we should give up our work, but he did ask us a silent question. Are you still human? Or have you become just an extension of the machine? We live in an era where everything needs to be optimized. Sleep better, eat faster, train with greater results, produce the most with the least. If there is an unspoken mantra in today's society, it is simple: don't waste time. And without realizing it, we have become devotees of efficiency. But Weber saw this coming. He saw that the world, by adopting rationality as its supreme guide, would begin to measure all actions by their usefulness. The beauty of a gesture, the depth of a conversation, the silence of a moment, all of these would give way to what can be calculated, managed, maximized. What does not generate a return is discarded. The result is a modern cult, the cult of productivity. Today, even rest needs to have a function. Apps monitor your sleep, your calories, your mood. We meditate to be more focused. We take vacations to come back more efficient. Even leisure has become an investment. Free time has become useful time. The break, a gap to gain performance. And when everything becomes an instrument, even the human being enters the equation as a resource. You are no longer a person, you are an asset, a collaborator, a cog that must deliver results. School prepares you for the market. The market demands performance from you. Performance defines your value. and value becomes a number. The name disappears. The soul disappears. The logic of efficiency is seductive. It promises control, clarity, order, but it demands a sacrifice, the imponderable, the useless, the spontaneous, that which serves no purpose, but which is exactly what makes life alive. Think about it. When was the last time you did something without expecting anything in return? When did you talk to someone just for the fun of it, not for networking? When did you let yourself waste time and discover something valuable in the process? Weber saw efficiency as a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it allowed for enormous advances, but on the other, it removed the mystery. It took away the charm. It turned life into an equation that always needs to be balanced. But what if life is precisely what escapes calculation? The big trap is that the more you try to adapt, the more you fade away. Because the system is never satisfied. There is always more to do, more to deliver, more to accomplish. You run, you wear yourself out, you surpass yourself, and yet you feel like it is never enough. And that's when the cage reveals itself in a cruel way. You run to be free, but with every step, you become more trapped. Time has become a resource, energy, capital. Human beings, a server of biological data, and efficiency, the new god, silent, demanding, insatiable. Imagine a world where all decisions are already planned, where every step follows a protocol, where people act not by intuition, but by procedure. Now realize, this world is not in the future, it is your present, and you are already operating within it, even without realizing it. Max Weber identified modern bureaucracy as one of the most lethal forms of rationalization. It is not just an administrative system, it is a mentality, a way of thinking that infiltrates everything. Institutions, relationships, even the way we love and make decisions. Bureaucracy is seductive because it seems fair. After all, everyone must follow the same rules. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, friendly or rude. What matters is that the form is filled out correctly. It eliminates emotions, it eliminates preferences, it eliminates biases. But in doing so, it also eliminates humanity. And the most curious thing, you started to apply this model to yourself. If before it was the state that bureaucratized you, now it is you who regulates your own existence. You demand efficiency from yourself. You create goals. You fill your schedule as if you were your own employee. The bureaucrat is no longer just in the office. He has settled inside you. Weber saw this with eyes of anguish, because the more we internalize the bureaucratic model, the more we lose the ability to live with the unexpected. We begin to reject everything that cannot be planned. Relationships become contracts. Emotions become data. Life is managed like a project. This logic infiltrates sacred places. In love, for example, how many people choose partners based on compatibility, stability, and future projections, as if they were hiring someone for a job? Spontaneity gives way to calculation. Passion becomes risk, and risk is unacceptable for those who live in a state of control. At work, this is even more visible. You measure your relevance by the number of tasks completed, by your performance in reports, by your visibility in systems. Creativity is stifled by processes. Initiative dies in meetings, and you start repeating words like protocol, flow, and validation as if they were mantras from a soulless temple. But Weber warned, when everything becomes a procedure, the soul dries up, and a new type of human being is born. Efficient, disciplined, functional, and empty. Have you ever felt like you're always busy, but disconnected? Have you ever felt like you're doing a lot, but living little? This is the mark of the new prisoner, the one who follows all the rules, but has lost all meaning. Bureaucracy is not just a system, it is a mirror. And perhaps the reflection it shows you is the one you most fear seeing. We live in an age that prides itself on freedom. We can choose what to wear, where to work, who to associate with, what to consume, where to live. But Weber left us with a bitter warning. What if this freedom is only apparent? What if we are choosing from within a display window, whose walls we never see? The iron cage does not work like a regular prison. It does not impose its orders by force, but but by seduction. Instead of chains, it offers preferences. Instead of imposition, options. But all these options are already programmed into the same system. It is like choosing the flavor of ice cream, but only from the ones in the store's freezer. This is conditioned freedom. You feel like you are in control, but only within the limits that the system allows. You can change companies, but not logic. You can change cell phones, but not cycles. You can even travel the world, as long as you return in time to produce again. Modern rationalization turns everything into a commodity, including the very idea of freedom. You are free to consume, free to work harder, free to exploit yourself to the point of exhaustion. Freedom has become a product with a label, something you pay dearly to feel, but that evaporates in an instant. Worse still, we start to believe that we need to earn this freedom, that we can only rest after we perform, that we can only allow ourselves to live after we reach our goals. Life has become a reward, and those who don't perform have no right to exist in peace. Weber saw this phenomenon as the tragic outcome of a society that had traded the sacred for efficiency. Before freedom came from within, it was the exercise of conscience, faith, and spirit. Now, it is a service, a plan, a benefit, and it is always at risk because it can be suspended if you do not obey. This logic is not limited to companies. It is present in relationships, social networks, and even spirituality. We follow profiles that promise high emotional performance, productive faith, and profitable self-knowledge. Everything can be capitalized upon. Even silence has become a technique. Even prayer has become a method. But true freedom, the kind Weber feared was disappearing, doesn't fit into spreadsheets. It's unpredictable, messy, dangerous. It makes you leave the safe path. It makes you stop in the middle of the day and breathe. It makes you say no to what everyone else accepts. It makes you live, even without any guarantee of return. The freedom the system offers you is polished, comfortable, adjusted. But the freedom your soul craves is raw, intense, uncontrollable. The question Weber leaves hanging is not whether you are free. It is, what kind of freedom have you accepted? Have you ever noticed how there is a silent pain behind so many smiling faces? How there is a tiredness that cannot be resolved with sleep, an anguish that cannot be erased with praise or pay? Weber did not use these words, but he predicted exactly this. What he called extreme rationalization, today we might call soul-crushing. The soul is everything that cannot be quantified. It is the deep sigh that no one sees. It is the shiver that cannot be explained. It is the emptiness that appears even when everything is right. And this is exactly what the rationalized world tries to erase. Because the soul does not generate profit, does not follow a schedule, does not meet deadlines. Therefore, she is silenced. In the model of society that Weber diagnosed, there is no room for what is imprecise. Emotion becomes instability. Pause becomes unproductivity. Sensitivity becomes weakness. The machine does not understand crying. The algorithm does not recognize poetry. The system does not process doubts, and the result is devastating. A human being who is increasingly functional and less alive. Routine swallows curiosity. Urgency stifles pleasure. The calendar eliminates chance, and in the end, what remains is a present body with an exhausted mind and a numb soul. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever caught yourself doing something without remembering why? Have you ever felt like your life is passing you by, but you're not in it? This is the symptom of a crushed soul, and it can't be cured with motivation, nor with more productivity. It can only be cured with a question that the system doesn't want you to ask. What for? Why so much effort? Why so much performance? Why so much planning, if in the end, you don't feel anything anymore? The tragedy is that the efficiency model doesn't recognize suffering. It only sees delay. An employee in crisis is a risk. A sensitive person is a problem. A broken heart is an outlier. So you learn to disguise it, to smile, to say everything is fine, to keep working. But the soul doesn't disappear, it just hides, and it starts screaming in other ways, through anxiety, through inexplicable sadness, through the desire to disappear, through the fear of stopping, through the constant feeling that something essential is missing and you don't know what. Weber understood this. He was not just a theorist of social structure. He was a man distressed about the direction of humanity. He knew that modern society could achieve everything and still lose the most important thing: the mystery, the enchantment, the depth, the soul. And maybe you still have a thread of it in there. Maybe that's why you're hearing this now, because in the midst of the noise of the machine, your soul is still trying to breathe. You get into an elevator. Someone asks, "What do you do?" And without realizing it, you respond with a job title, a profession, as if that were you, as if that defined your existence. Max Weber already saw this coming. Human beings becoming confused with their own function. We are no longer souls living an experience. We are positions trying to survive in the structure. And when your identity is reduced to what you deliver, what you produce, what you represent in the organization chart, the human disappears. What was once a vocation is now an obligation. What was once a job is now a label. Function has become an identity. Specialization has become a prison. And the human being, once complex and plural, has become a single name: analyst, manager, director, influencer, collaborator, freelancer, executor. You start living to maintain the character, waking up with him, sleeping with him, eating with him. If he fails, you fail. If he gets fired, you feel like you disappear, because the cage is no longer outside, it's inside your own name. Modern society applauds those who perform their duties with excellence, but it despises those who question the meaning of those duties. If you say you want to leave, that you don't feel well, that you don't fit in, you hear, "But you have a good job, a good position, a good career," and what seemed like praise sounds like a sentence. You can't make any more mistakes. You can't stop. You can't listen to the discomfort because there are goals, expectations. Someone depends on your delivery. So you swallow the scream, swallow the doubt, swallow the truth, and you continue on paper. The problem is that roles are useful on stage, but no one survives living only on stage. How many people do you know who live exactly like this? Always busy, always efficient, always present, but strangely absent, as if they were on autopilot, as if they were there, but not really there. Weber already foresaw this collapse. Modern man, according to him, was becoming a cog so adapted to the machine that he forgot to be whole. The part dominated the whole. The task devoured consciousness. And this creates an invisible wound. The constant feeling of being out of place, of being productive, but not fulfilled, of being competent, but not complete, of being someone, but no longer knowing who. You were not born to be just the role you play. You were not born to perform tasks. You are not the badge, nor the performance, nor the feed, nor the report. But as long as you believe that you are, you will remain trapped. After so many grim diagnoses, it is natural to ask, is there a way out? Max Weber was a realist. He offered no easy consolation, nor promises of a magical escape. For him, the rationalization of the world was an inevitable process, a price of modernity, but that does not mean that we are condemned to live without a soul. Weber did not want us to return to the Middle Ages. He did not propose the end of science or progress. What he warned about was the imbalance, the urgency of recovering what had been left behind. He believed that there were still spaces of resistance, gaps through which humans could escape. These gaps are not grand. They are not in systems or structures. They are in small but authentic gestures. They are in the silence of a journey without a destination, in the art that is born without planning, in the hug without a reason, in the prayer that springs forth without a method, in the time that you live without a function. Other thinkers came later and engaged in dialogue with Weber. Nietzsche spoke of the rediscovery of instinct. Frankl proposed the recovery of meaning. Camus embraced the absurd as a force. All of them, in different ways, tried to address the same question. How can you be free in a world that was made to imprison you? The answer may not lie in destroying the cage, but in remembering that it exists. because only those who see the bars can choose not to be confused by them. Only those who recognize the prison begin to gradually walk the path of consciousness. This awareness begins when you question your pace, when you realize that the system taught you to run, but never asked you where you wanted to go. When you look at your routine and ask yourself, does this bring me closer to who I am, or does it take me further away? It's not about dropping everything, running away to a cabin, and cutting off the Wi-Fi. Total escape can be just another form of imprisonment. The idea is more subtle, waking up inside the machine without letting it swallow you. It is possible to live in the modern world without being shaped by it. It is possible to use the tools without becoming a slave to them. It is possible to work, to produce, to contribute, and still keep alive the spark that the system cannot extinguish. This spark is what Weber, deep down, wanted to preserve. The ability to question, to feel, to create, to say no. To affirm life even when everything around you says you are just another piece. The system will continue to exist. The cage will not disappear. But perhaps it can be left behind when you decide to live for something greater than it. We have reached the point where the question is no longer whether the cage exists. It does. It is all around you, in your diary, in your emails, in your forced smiles, in your empty applause, in the goals that don't represent you. The question now is, what are you going to do with it? Weber didn't leave maps to freedom, but he did leave a mirror. And perhaps that was his greatest courage, forcing us to look at it, not so that we can escape reality, but so that we can finally stop living on autopilot. Because until you recognize your prison, you continue to live in it, thinking it's a choice. The way out is not easy. It never has been. Because it requires something that the system has tried to rip out of you: authenticity. It is easier to follow orders, to repeat behaviors, to meet expectations. The courage lies in asking yourself, every day, what of all this is really mine? Maybe you're still in the same job, in the same building, with the same badge. But something in you can change. You can start to breathe differently, to look more truthfully, to say yes with presence and no with firmness. And that, however small it may seem, is insurrection. It's the soul moving. Weber provoked us to think, what happens to a society that replaces faith with function, mystery with metric, and human being with system? What happens to an individual who has become an excellent performer, but no longer knows what he loves, what he believes in, or where he wants to go? You can continue as you are. Most people do. They go with the flow. They push buttons. They climb ladders. They go down spreadsheets. They do what they're told. They do their job. They live and die without ever having asked themselves if this is what they really want. Or you can now listen to what the system fears: the silence of your conscience. It is in this silence that revolution is born. It is in this silence that you hear something that no notification can deliver: your own truth. There is no formula for breaking the cage, because it was tailor-made for each one of us. But there is a spark, a decision, a first step. Stop pretending you are free when you know you are not. This is the beginning, because what holds you back is not the system. It is the illusion that there is no alternative. But there is always, even if it is small, even if it is difficult, even if it is lonely, there is a way out. And it begins when you understand that you were trained to be functional, but you were born to be real. If this video has stirred something within you, if you felt like at some point you were hearing yourself between the words, then please like and subscribe to the channel now. Here, we don't live to keep the system running. We live to awaken who you really are, because you are not a piece, you are not a function, you are consciousness in its raw state. And it is time for the world to listen to you. Activate the bell, and never walk alone in the dark again.